A little bit more incentive, disincentive. So you sort of ask yourself, what's your definition? What's your expectation? What are you trying to get out of it? Like I said, commonly it's typically what I've seen used a lot for time type issues, internal milestones. And then what's related to as far as the activities. Could be related here, like I've got access to businesses. I put down noise walls. As an example, on some of my projects in the past, for a corridor that was getting built, noise was a hot item, especially for residential and properties alongside the facility. For federal highways, we do have the noise policy requirements, which I mentioned to you before, but one way we tackled that was due to the heightened awareness of all the businesses, property owners along the freeway and the noise requirements allowed and the potential noise walls to be built, we did a noise wall study for the corridor, of which, knowing that there were future projects in the next 5-10 years coming through, we ended up putting in the noise walls in as, say, part one of a project, 20-mile section. And by putting them in phase one of a future 5, 6, 7 phase project, these are all separate contracts as an example, how do you think that addressed noise for future contracts? Well, the reality is it got the public and businesses off of the state's back to where the future projects ended up just turned into place and fill and putting down pavement. There was no noise issue, so all the conflicts and potential suits from noise, excessive noise, construction building, et cetera, all those went away. So instead of turning into constantly property owners, businesses, homeowners complaining, it turned into a simple bring in some fill and put down the pavement. So those are things, if you think big picture out, think big projects coming in the phase, that's one way to jump to a feature, put it in early, and you can take advantage to fast track the other projects. Okay? And then we get into environmental mitigation, incentive, disincentive, like I mentioned a little bit before. If you've got any particular species or particular environmental 106 historic 4F, et cetera, that you want to pay more attention to, maybe incentive, disincentive is a way to help get it done quicker. But avoid making any state-directed changes, as, like I mentioned before, it could end up turning into a gimme where you have an incentive if the contractor met it, and with your state-directed change order after award of the contract, you've actually turned that incentive they may have double shifted into a gimme, meaning that you've ended up paying for it twice. Okay, has that ever happened here? You guys have paid for something twice? Guess not? Okay. Okay, a little bit more. Then the other ones out there are lane rentals. Have you guys tried lane rentals? No? Anybody got an idea what it is? I think Jerry mentioned a little bit. It's basically you rent X lane for X time, ideally based upon road user costs, which means it's typically used in heavy urban areas, urban areas with heavy traffic, ideally during the peak hours, which could be AM and or PM. And they run from a time frame of, could be on a 5, 10, 15 minute increment of that X dollars based upon your road user cost, that and no tolerance or tolerance, again, depending on what criteria you want to establish, that the contractor can get docked. I know for some of them in LA on I-5 or 110, which is probably, I guess I'd say 14, 16 lanes total going across. The delays could be, I think it was like 5 to 10,000 per 15 minutes, so it can quickly add up, and that should certainly motivate the contractor to move aggressively to finish their projects. Okay, A plus B plus C. You guys use A plus B, right, or have used it? Anybody tried the C? Okay, what have you guys used for C?
Weekend closure.
Sorry, what was it?
Weekend closure.
Weekend closures, okay. And that worked for you? Yeah, and actually it's sort of similar to what if you probably heard a couple years ago at the San Francisco Oakland Bay Bridge on Treasure Island, where they shut down the San Francisco Oakland Bay Bridge for the Labor Day weekend, which had major success because how many people have been out to Frisco? San Francisco? A few of you? Anyway, when they were building getting rid of the old steel one and then putting in the new one, they shut that down because they actually slid in the top bridge deck over the weekend, that 3-day weekend where over on the Coast Guard side, federal lands, they had built it. It's one of those slide projects where they built the full deck, and over the weekend they slid that whole deck across for, I think it's the 4 to 5 lanes, top deck, which is sort of, and they closed it the following year for the lower deck. So it's sort of interesting how they've taken advantage of that as far as like a A plus, B plus C, and that was part of that big project. And then the thing to point out again on for ID clauses is recognize if you want incremental milestones, that's something collectively, whether it's environmental, design, construction, right away, those are all things when you think cost and time. IDs are a good way to potentially get that time savings and or cost savings, but it would, you and your group need to talk about that, how important for you is it, and then figure out how much the penalty would be and or the cost under your road user cost formula. So how many people have done a road user cost formula or analysis to figure out what that dollar amount is? Lee in the back, Gerald, a few of you. So that may be another area you may be worth looking into a little bit more as far as, it's pretty simple, but it depends what your criteria is and you just sort of crank the numbers.